Hello. Hey, how you doing? Good morning or afternoon, but it's always morning as far as I'm concerned. Alright. Just give it a second while we see if anyone wants to jump on, have a chat. Alright. So, what I wanted to have a chat about today is looking into more of the whole story about what's going on, right, with your weight, I guess. So here in Melbourne right now, it is summer. We've gotten into summer, right? And so obviously if people haven't already been sort of focused on it, now tends to be the time that more and more people get like really, really focused on wanting to lose weight. So part of that is obviously the obvious stuff. So the, your calorie deficit and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to start off by saying, if you think you're in a calorie deficit and you're not losing weight, I'm going to say that probably, I'm sorry, but at the end of the day, I think that you're just not. You're kind of kidding yourself one way or another, or you just don't really know exactly what you're doing, and therefore you think you are, and you think you're legitimately doing what's required, but you're not. And that's just from experience that I can say that. However many times, I guess, a lot of the time is people will either be lying to themselves or lying to their PT or whatever it is. And I know that happens because, I've been the person that's lied in the past, not to my PT, but to myself. And also I've had clients admit it in the past where they've gone, okay, yeah. No, I'm doing this. And you're like, well, I'm beat then. I don't know, I understand why you're not getting results. And then later on, they'll actually admit the truth to you that no, really, they weren't telling the truth. They were actually going out and getting some cheap meals, or they were actually secretly eating and emotional eating and that kind of stuff. And people don't want to admit to that, right? Because it sounds horrible and doesn't sound good, and you think your PT is going to look down on you and all that kind of stuff. So I get that, right? But this isn't about that. This is, if you well and truly are actually in a deficit, and you know you are, and you're sticking to it, and you're being honest with yourself and that kind of stuff, this is something that's really important to understand, is that our bodies are not all made the same. And as much as certain ways of eating can definitely work for most people, at the end of the day, we are slightly different, and therefore we all have, as you know, some of your friends might have different intolerances, food intolerances, that kind of stuff, or allergies even. And the thing is, it's just a purely one-on-one kind of thing, that some people will have different allergies and different intolerances to food, right? So this is something that's really important to look at. If you're not getting the results you wanted, this could be where it's at, and it does really, really vary. So whilst one of your friends might say to you, oh yeah, I was really struggling with losing weight, and then I started, I cut out dairy, or I cut out gluten, or whatever it is, and you're like, oh yeah, awesome, I'm going to do that. And then you do it and it doesn't work for you. It's because everybody's digestive system is different. While there are definitely similarities and definitely things that will help you, it is very different. So if you're online right now and you're listening and you have any questions and you're wondering about this kind of stuff, let me know. Say hi, pop any comments in the box, and I'm happy to have a chat with you about it. But the thing that really matters, and I guess the easiest way to figure this out, yeah, for sure, you can go to a doctor, you can go get it all checked out and have different allergy tests done. And from the sounds of things, I've never actually done it myself, but from people who have done it that have told me about it, and my clients and stuff that have done it, it sounds like a pain in the ass. It's a very long process, and not always a very fun one, to be honest. And quite frankly, from experience, there's just easier ways to do it and faster ways to get it done. And the easiest way is to listen to your body. I have a feeling that most people, if they actually tuned in and listened to their body, you'd be able to tell what it is that's not working right, yeah? Like, you'd be able to sort of go, okay, after this particular thing that I eat, I don't feel great. Or after this particular thing, I get bloated, or I get really bad diarrhea, or I get really bad constipation, or whatever it is. Like, you can just judge from your own body what feels good and what doesn't. And also to the point of like, well, I don't have energy for my workouts, or I eat this kind of stuff and I smash out my workouts and I feel great, or I eat this and I don't feel great, and all that kind of stuff. It's really like, it's your body's trying to tell you this stuff all the time. If you're just not listening, then that's the problem, right? But I get a feeling that most people, if they actually just tuned in for a moment and thought about it, they'd probably come up with what they think could be an issue. And that's all it takes a lot of the time, is to just kind of look at it and go, well, what is something that possibly is not working for me? Whether it is that maybe it's the dairy, maybe I don't feel particularly great after dairy. Maybe it's, and for me particularly, one thing that I realise, and my body speaks to me in different ways as everybody's does, one of the things that I really pick up on pretty quickly is my skin, right? So I tend to get really bad breakouts whenever I'm eating food that doesn't agree with me. My body itself has a very high tolerance for most food, and that probably goes back to my binge eating and emotional eating days, where I'd be able to eat copious amounts of food and my body would just learn to digest it. It wouldn't feel great, but it'd pretty much put up with it because I trained it into that. But the way that my body speaks to me now is much more subtly. Things like I said, my skin. So if I'm eating food that doesn't agree with me, I tend to break out pretty quickly. And it's something that I've realised in just the past few weeks, because I kind of stopped eating as much dairy, or really much at all. And so I changed over to having some soy milk with a bit of like coffee or whatever it is that I have later in the day after I've stopped my fasting. And I've realised, and it was literally the only thing I've changed in the past few weeks, and my skin started breaking out again. And so it's just one of those things that it kind of goes, well, when your diet's pretty similar and all that kind of stuff, you can narrow it down pretty quickly. So the best thing to do is, first of all, pick what you think it could be, and then just start cutting it out. So literally, if it's soy, start cutting out soy and see how you go with it. If you think it might be dairy or a lactose kind of thing, try cutting that out. And dairy and lactose are different things. So if you're trying to cut out dairy, that's going to be a different case to cutting out all lactose, because then you're still having dairy products. They're just lactose free, right? So that's a different kind of thing. But you've got to pick something, and you've got to give it probably at least 2 weeks to see how you're actually reacting to it before you kind of start judging it. Now, I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not a doctor or anything like that. This is purely from experience, because like I said, from people, from my clients and from friends that have gone through this, the whole actually going through this and doing the medically testing doesn't sound like a hell of a lot of fun a lot of the time. So, and especially now around Christmas and that kind of stuff, if you feel like, oh, I just don't have the time, or I just don't have the real want to kind of go and do this through a doctor, well, you know what, you can, I mean, it's not self-diagnosing, it's just self-listening, really just checking into your body and figuring out what's working and what's not, and then just giving it a go. But the main thing is, you've got to give it a proper go. Like, you can't just kind of go, oh yeah, I did it for a day, and then I had and then I had some cheese. Oh, and then I did it for another couple of days, but then I went out and had dessert, and it was like a creamy chocolate cake or something. You do need to stick to it, or else you're not assessing anything, are you? You're just assessing your body's ability to adapt to changes constantly. But you need to be able to actually stick with it for a period of time. Like I said, as a guide, I give it 2 weeks before you start to really reassess. And I would do things like take photos. That's a really big one, because the thing with doing measurements and doing weight and stuff, that's all great for tracking. But when it's something that's not agreeing with your body and that's stalling your goals and everything like that, it shows up in inflammation a lot more than anything else. So you'll actually notice it more so in photos than in anything else, because you'll look at them and you'll go, okay, yeah, I can see that I'm actually really puffy, or I'm holding fluid in particular areas, I'm retaining water in particular areas. And that can be a really big sign towards an allergy or an intolerance to some food. Okay, not an allergy, because if you've got an allergy, you're going to know, because that's a very serious thing, but an intolerance to a particular food, right? So you're going to be able to tell very quickly, based on the photos, what actually is going on and whether you are retaining water. You're going to be able to look at, are you bloated? Is particular parts of your limbs, your body, actually looking really fluidy and really puffy compared to others? And that can be a really big sign as well that you tend to hold any inflammation and any allergy type intolerance in particular areas, which is very common. If you've ever looked around, at the gym or wherever you are, and looked at people and seen they have these different body types, where some people are just really bottom heavy or really top heavy, or like even this really sort of strange look where they're quite fat right through the center, like through their entire torso, and then really thin like limbs, legs and arms and that kind of stuff. And it's not a body type, it's purely an inflammation, and it's purely a something's not going right in the body. That means that they're holding that inflammation and that intolerance in that particular area. And this can come down to a lot of things, so I'm not going to go into all of the different stuff. But the point is to pay attention to your body, because it's trying to talk to you constantly. It's trying to tell you what's going on constantly. That's just what it does. But give it a go. Pick something that you feel like, okay, yep, I have an inkling that it could be gluten, or I have an inkling that it could be dairy, or I have an inkling that it could be lactose, or like I said, for me, last couple of months, I've realised since I've switched to soy that even though my body itself hasn't really greatly changed, I can tell that my body's intolerant from other things. Like I said, my skin and stuff, it starts breaking out a lot. So I start realising that, right? But you've got to pick something and then give it a couple of weeks of actually strictly sticking to getting it out of your system. Because if you're not, then you're not really tracking anything and you're not really getting a valid result, right? And then compare. So look at those photos and have a look and see, okay, yep, this looks different. This part of me looks different. I look less bloated. I look more bloated. And then you can take it from there. But if you're having issues with plateauing and not really getting those kind of results in terms of your body, there may be a little bit more to it. Now, like I said, I'm going to be honest that 90% of the time, if not more, it really just is that you think you're in a deficit and you're not, for whatever reason, whether it's that you are just straight up lying to yourself and other people, or whether it's that you just don't realise how you are overeating, or how you are actually having more than you realise because maybe you've gotten lazy, you've stopped tracking as much, you've had a few little things here and there, you've underestimated something, if you're in the habit of going out a lot for food, like for meals and for dinners and all that kind of stuff. If you're in that habit, then it's very common that you might be underestimating what you're actually eating because you can't track it accurately. And because when you go out and have food, even something really simple that you think you can track, you can't really track how they're cooking it, as much as they might say they're cooking it a certain way. At the end of the day, if it's not food that you're preparing, you don't really know. So a lot of people find that their best results start to come when they stop relying on takeout and on food that is prepared by someone else and just stick to actually counting it themselves for a few weeks, and they go, oh wow, this is working, I was on the right numbers, whatever. It was purely that whatever I was getting fed when I was out there wasn't really honestly what it was. It's as simple as that, right? So if you are in that stage where you feel like you're doing everything, you're tracking all your food, and it's not working, 2, 3, 4 weeks is not uncommon. That's not an issue. But once you're getting past that, if you're still not really getting any of the changes at all that you want, and I don't mean like small changes, sometimes it is small changes for a while, that's fine. But if you're literally getting no change whatsoever, not on the scale, not in your photos, not in your clothes fitting differently, whatever it is that your goal is, if after about 3, 4 weeks you're still completely nutter, then that is the time to maybe start looking at do you maybe have a slight intolerance to something which is basically blocking up your system and blocking your results from accelerating? It's something definitely to look at, because everyone is different, everyone's bodies are different, and the way that we react and the way that we process is very different. So having a look at that, cutting out for a couple of weeks, whatever it is that you have a feeling that it might be, and then reassess. And you might be wrong, it might not be that, and then great, you just try something else, right? But sometimes you won't know until you do it. And for sure, go see a doctor, go get the actual proper tests done if you want to. I'm not a doctor, so I don't really know what the process is. I just know from friends and from clients that it is quite a lengthy process. But hey, it might have changed. I don't know. I just know that personally for myself, I'm not a big doctor person. I really prefer to fix things that I can fix myself. That's just who I am. And obviously I have a lot of other beliefs on it as well, but that's kind of neither here nor there. The point is, whatever way you want to do it, whatever way feels right for you, go do it. But stick to it, give it a go, track your weight, track your measurements and stuff like that, but most importantly, track photos, because that's where it's really got to show up as to what's really going on. All right. So if nobody has any questions, anything you want to chat about, I'll give it another minute. I don't think anyone's on right now, so that's okay. And then we might finish up. All right. Cool. All right, so we'll finish it up there, guys. I'll see you soon. Have a wonderful weekend. Bye.